Welcome one and all to this week's episode of the Síle Show. My guest today is Tom McKenna, Superintendent Pharmacist at Balally Pharmacy in Sandymount in Dublin. A Trinity graduate, originally from Limerick, and a pharmacist working at one of the most revealing points in Irish healthcare, the community pharmacy. At a time when medicine is more specialised than ever, the pharmacist remains one of the few clinicians who sees the whole picture. The repeat prescriptions, the new diagnoses, the subtle shifts in demand, and the questions that patients might not always bring to the consultation room. Healthcare in Ireland is undoubtedly advancing. We are diagnosing more, we're screening more, we're prescribing more. But is it worth asking the question gently and thoughtfully, are we always striking the right balance? Are we sometimes too quick to medicalise the ordinary challenges of living? And do we leave enough space in the system for discernment alongside intervention? In recent years, menopause, quite rightly, had its national moment. Public discourse shifted, conversations opened, and long overdue recognition followed. And this week on the Síle Show, we're hoping to give Andropause its moment too, exploring how hormonal change in men should be understood, supported, but is sometimes overlooked. We're also going to discuss the day-to-day reality of modern pharmacy practice, which prescriptions are most frequently filled, the rise in GLP-1 medications and ADHD treatments, the enduring place of statins, the growing interest in wise supplementation and preventative care, and what these trends might tell us about the broader health of the nation. This is a conversation about perspective, about balance, and about thoughtful care in a rapidly evolving system. So, without further ado, Tom McKenna, the heartiest of Síle Show welcomes to lovely you.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me, Sheila.
Well, it's just great to chat. So, the community pharmacist with the online community, and only in the last 5 or 6 months.
Yeah, it kind of, I've had a pharmacy in Sandyford for 10 years now. But about 5 months ago, I started with all of the, vaccine season stuff. I thought it might be a handy way of kind of getting a message out, letting people know what the current cohort was for this and that, and when the vaccines would be available. Might save me a bit of communication time in store. And it kind of organically kind of all developed from that. I mean, I'm naturally chatty. So when I'm in front of the screen or the phone, I tend to blather away. And as it kind of took off then, I needed a bit of help. And I'm very fortunate and blessed that my good lady wife, Melissa, who is a chartered physiotherapist, who understands a lot of the healthcare stuff that I'll be talking about. She's fantastic on the technical side. So she sticks the phone in front of me and she makes me look good. But she's my creative director. I'm only the talent, as they say.
Isn't that the money shot? Amazing. So the videographer and your wife, and works with you in the pharmacy as well, doesn't she?
She's my brain's trust. Yeah, she's a great, fantastic woman.
Isn't that amazing? So where to start? I have so many questions. We had such a chat even before we went on air, and I feel that we've covered so much ground. I need to make sure and pare back and share with our audience.
Anywhere you like. Jump in.
Could we start, Tom, with the whole world of information that is out there and not out there regarding GLP-1s?
Yeah, sure. So, GLP-1s have kind of sprung up on society rapidly over the last couple of years. They originally came out and were developed as a treatment for diabetes, and it's important to remember that. They were originally researched and developed and evaluated for safety for treating diabetes patients. And it was only subsequent to social media stuff then that they started being used independently for weight loss treatments for patients who didn't have diabetes. So these products work by binding with receptors, hormone receptors, and they help the body to regulate blood sugar levels, and they kind of dampen down the food noise, the satiety, or your sense of hunger. And that, as a consequence, then it makes it easier for people to make food choices and to lose weight. So as a community pharmacist, we see an awful lot of prescriptions for all sorts of people. And one of our key concerns is safety. So we want to make sure people know how to safely use the product. And it's important maybe to have that demonstrated to you, how to connect the needle properly, how to, calibrate your pen, how to get it ready to go. And crucially, I would say to anyone, one of our Tom's tips, if you have your smartphone, set your day once a week that you're doing it on the same day each week. And the other thing I would say, if you're going to an online doctor or if you're seeing a specialist who's prescribing your GLP-1, it's really important to keep your community pharmacist involved, that they know what you're doing, and also that your GP knows, because your local doctor and your local pharmacy is typically where your medical information and your prescriptions converge, and there are actually a lot of potentially dangerous drug interactions, and a lot of people aren't aware of that when they're focused on their weight loss journey. So if I just give you just one or two little quick examples. So there's a medicine for hypothyroidism that is called levothyroxine. The common name that most patients would know it as is L-troxin. And because GLP-1s cause a delay or a slowing down of gastric emptying, this can have a pronounced effect on how levothyroxine is absorbed and processed in the body. And a patient could actually warrant a very substantial and need a substantial adjustment, up to a 25% of an adjustment in their L-troxin dosage, depending on their situation. And, if your GP, who's looking after your bread and butter stuff, isn't aware you're on your GLP-1, that's a concern, And so it's important so communication is key. Make sure that your doctor, your pharmacist, any healthcare professionals share information. Don't be embarrassed about it. And knowledge isn't a burden. Common area then is HRT. Believe it or not, HRT and other hormone products like there are progesterone pills, where again, because of the delayed gastric emptying with GLP-1s, it can render a progesterone-only pill ineffective, and it can compromise the absorption of your progesterone. And this isn't really necessarily obvious when, like if you're talking to a consultant doctor about your GLP-1 and you're talking about your weight loss goals and you're concerned maybe about, are you pre-diabetic or do you have maybe insulin resistance, or you're talking about all this stuff and you're not necessarily relating it to your bread and butter, other stuff, and often we do see weight gain in perimenopausal and menopausal women as your metabolism slows down, and indeed as we get older and we're not as active as we once were, if that makes sense. So so that's kind of that's a huge area, and so in many cases, people's progesterone dose, if it's for HRT, for example, their progesterone dose will need to be elevated if it's affecting them. And really, when you think back, somebody's HRT journey begins with a set of bloods. You're understanding where somebody's hormone levels are, where they're deficient, and you're determining levels of supplementation. And this is what your prescriber is doing for you. But your prescriber, to be able to look after you properly, needs to be aware of what you're up to. So if you're getting GLP-1s from a different doctor and you're worried about, you don't want to offend your GP by not telling them, it's really important to share, because you could be actually self-sabotaging and compromising your own health. And, these are the kind of unintended consequences we worry about. Then there's heart medication, cardiovascular drugs, medicines like digoxin. It's a medicine that has a very narrow therapeutic index, so it's very easy to disrupt it from a therapeutic dosage to a dangerous dosage or suboptimal. And again, GLP-1s do affect the absorption of those medications and also antibiotics. So there's a wide variety of areas where GLP-1s can cause drug interactions. And so that's an area that your pharmacist, who will know as a patient, will know your prescription. You would always encourage somebody to traffic back to your own local healthcare practitioners when you're getting your GLP-1s, because they'll know your medical history. And if there's an issue or a clash with one of your existing medicines, well, your local pharmacist is going to be the one to point it out for you. And that's not always obvious to the patient. I mean, it's a very normal part of our job every day. In the background, local GPs and local pharmacists are back channeling and checking dosages. Is there an item missing? What did you mean to do that? Have you considered the interaction there? All this kind of stuff happens seamlessly in the background all the time. That's what healthcare professionals do. And I think it's very important when a patient, their role really is self-advocacy. So when they're trying to achieve your health goals, that you're consistently communicating, whether it's with the pharmacist or the doctor, what you're up to. So that kind of just gives you an idea just about drug interactions, Sheila. But there's so much more to it than that.
Wow, so much. That was like, I feel like you're entitled to say thank you for coming to my TED Talk at the end of that.
I'm sorry if I...
No,
yeah.
It's what an introduction. And I'm thinking, and as I'm tracking the information that you're sharing, I'm also thinking it's a whole other bandwidth in the area of informed consent as well. So I'm not 100% sure that people, although they think they're doing the right thing, and they're, it's going to be well when they do this because they lose weight, and with losing weight, there are going to be so many benefits, or so they might think. But it is very important to be extremely well informed about everything, because it's not always as it seems.
That's a very good point. And absolutely. So in the intro there, I was just talking about just the drug interactions. There is a plethora of side effects, although I have to be careful. I do want to preface, we're all about the safe, rational use of medicines, and GLP-1s as a category of medicines, if they're appropriately prescribed at appropriate dosages for the right patients, they're delivering tremendous health benefits, and we'll talk to that in a second. But just on your point there about informed consent, it's really important that people are aware and do their research. And I'd always encourage anyone to stall the digger a little bit. If you're thinking about going on to GLP-1, take the time to do your little bit of research. Generally speaking, I find women are very, very good at supporting each other, much better than fellas. So talk to your friends. Maybe you've got a colleague or somebody who's had one, and you can learn from their experience. And certainly talk to your GP or ask your pharmacist. You can get some foundation knowledge there. And then really it's about, if you're nearing your decision, it's about going to your own prescriber who, and I'd encourage it to be your GP, to be honest with you, who already knows your full history. And that's probably the safest way to go. But there are real side effects. And as a clinical pharmacist, our approach is, if you think of a seesaw on a playground, on one side of the seesaw, we have risks, and the other side of the seesaw, we have benefits. So when we use fancy phrases like clinical rationale for using a medicine, we mean that the seesaw needs to be massively unbalanced, benefits versus risks. And really, it's that simple. So GLP-1s can help you dramatically lose weight loss. There's a couple of different products out there. So semaglutide, or as its trade name, Ozempic. We've got Wegovy, we've got Mounjaro, and with Mounjaro, you can hope to lose 15 to 20% of body weight. That's kind of what's achievable. With Ozempic or semaglutide, you're looking at 10, 12, maybe 15%, down around there. It varies a lot person to person, so they're generalizations. So that's, so side effects. There are people, they're common side effects potentially are nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. And constaria, is that the word as well?
Yeah, a mixture of
episodal
both.
Of one or the other.
Yes.
So what I find, again, no matter how busy you are, when you come to get your GLP-1, make sure you've got time to have a chat, and ideally see if I would advise you to see if you have time, if the pharmacist has time to have a consultation with you, that you could, that you've got a really good grounding in how you start. So what I find with most people is that if you're given the right lifestyle advice, if you can feel good and stay strong, it's much easier to keep going. A lot of people abandon cart on this stuff because they feel so wretched along the way, and it's preventable. So I'm just going to touch for a second, if I may, on the common side effects and how you can prevent and best manage those, and maybe we'll touch on the rarer ones then as well. So nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, or constipation brain fog, headaches. It sounds like an awful lot, right? So the most important thing, you want to have realistic goals. So it's really important that you hydrate. So I would encourage anyone on a GLP-1 to consider having electrolytes every morning in maybe a beaker that you carry around with you, and it's a physical prompt to keep you on task with the electrolytes. If you're targeting 2 liters a day, you'll manage 1.5. If you don't have a target, it's not so much about achieving the target. It's just that without the target, you're unlikely to actually drink much. If it's in your mind that you have a target, you're likely to do better. So,
is this, Tom, because as you urinate more on the GLP-1 that you're urinating away your own minerals? Are you replenishing sodium?
It's so when we take electrolytes, we're supplementing the body with sodium and potassium and to an extent glucose. That's what happens when we're taking electrolytes. The reason we're doing that is because when people are on GLP-1s, they're eating dramatically less, and therefore they're getting way less electrolytes than normal. And as a consequence, then they tend to have frequent headaches. They get brain fog and headaches from the lack of electrolytes. So you can get in front of that aspect of it. So if you hydrate well and you have your electrolytes daily, have a little Stanley beaker or whatever kind of beaker. I think the physical prompt of carrying a beaker is a great idea because you're carrying it around with you and it keeps you going. So that'll help mitigate the risk of having those recurring headaches and brain fog, because that gets a person down after a while. It gets in on top of you.
And also it affects even just your tracking in a conversation, because if you've got great brain as opposed to raisin brain, you're on it, you're listening, you're aware, and you can process and involve. But if you're dehydrated, you're not really in a conversation. You're not in your generous present moment.
No, you're not present. You're a diminished version of yourself. You're dragging yourself around, So that's a very important point. And the same thing then is if you feel like, if you're feeling really, really weak and fatigued, it's very, very hard to keep going. And at the same time, this is the very same way, at the same time, you don't feel like the urge to eat. So the most important thing is you need to have protein 3 times a day. Every time, you must eat at every mealtime some protein 3 times a day. So in the morning time, that could be maybe some eggs. It could be a small bit of muesli with some blueberries and a bit of Greek yogurt. There's different ways of doing it and you can rotate it around. But the most important thing is that every meal, whatever's on your plate, start with the protein. Because sometimes you'll get sandbagged. After a few bites to eat, you'll push the plate away and say, you know what, I can't manage anymore. And at least you've had the bit of protein. Okay? So if you don't, what happens is you'll end up losing the wrong weight. So if you do not take in enough protein every day, you'll end up breaking down muscle mass. You'll lose muscle mass, and that's counterproductive. Okay? So if you want to keep your metabolic rate up, you have to maintain your protein intake, even though you don't feel like eating. So one of the summary phrases I like to use, and it's kind of counterintuitive. Sometimes we say, you're not eating enough to lose weight. And this is one of the mistakes that people make on GLP-1s. They say, it's fantastic. I've lost 4 pounds this week, or I've lost 5 pounds this week. I hardly feel the need to eat at all until the evening time. And I feel very sorry when I hear that, because that person is going to run into a brick wall in 2 or 3 weeks. Their body is going to gang up and their metabolic rate will crash, and it's not sustainable. So slow and steady wins the race. And, if we think about the patient cohort here, so if you're in your 40s or 50s and you've slowed down a little bit and your metabolic rate is slowed down, maybe you're menopausal, perimenopausal, who knows? If you've got a bit of a weight issue and you're trying to lose weight, the first thing is you have to have sensible, reasonable goals. If your goals aren't achievable, it's psychological bullying. You're picking on yourself. So 1.5 to 2 pounds a week, even with a GLP-1, is really all that is sustainable. If you lose, the good news is, now that's not a very sexy message, but if you lose 1.5 to 2 pounds a week, that's sustainable weight loss where your body is not going to get spooked and your metabolic rate won't necessarily crash. Okay, so, it's really important, I think, to hold on to the idea of muscle mass. That phrase about feeling good and staying strong. If I feel good and I'm staying strong because I'm looking after my hydration and my electrolytes and I have my basic protein needs met, it's much easier to keep going. It's much easier to keep at it. Where it's very, very hard to stay motivated when you're feeling dreadful and you're dragging yourself around the place. So, so if you've got reasonable goals and you understand that food is medicine, you need your basic protein needs, and the third piece of the puzzle then is fibre. Because you are eating dramatically less than normal, right? If it doesn't go in this end, it can't come out the other end, okay? So we need a certain amount of fibre, and let's face it, on a GLP-1, the appetite just isn't there for it. So what a lot of patients will end up doing, there are fibre supplements. Now again, you can meet your fibre needs from a muesli cereal or Weetabix or whatever, but if you're struggling with that, some patients will find a little soluble, like a Fibogel sachet is a product that you can dissolve in a glass of water and give it a stir. And that's just a simple fibre bulking product, and you drink it, and that will help you keep things moving. And it's much easier to prevent constipation than it is trying to relieve it. So hydration, electrolytes, taking care of fibre, and taking care of protein, and having realistic goals. That's part of the chat and getting ready for beginning. And you need to resource yourself up, tool yourself up with the knowledge before you start. And I think that's very, very important.
My goodness, so informative, and it's speaking again to the fact that we really need to be prescribing lifestyle medicines as well as any of these, because I wouldn't dare suggest quick fixes. They are an obesity medication that is really efficacious. Again, as you say, appropriately prescribed to the right people with the appropriate support. But without the emotional fitness and the emotional needs audit as you go, it would be very easy to fall off the wagon, whether you stay on the medication or not, and you wouldn't see the longevity solution that you were hoping for, I would imagine.
Yeah, and sadly, again, that we see that so often. A GLP-1 is not a magic bullet. Okay, I always encourage people to be talking, and so whatever your support group is, whether if you're lucky enough to be in a family unit at home, have family support, explain to people the journey you're on, and I think it's so important. So many times, if people don't use the opportunity of that window of time while they're taking the GLP-1, if they don't use that period of time properly, they can really, really struggle. And remember, the other part of it is, if people have had significant weight, that there's a thing called body dysmorphia. So people don't want to be noticed. They're huddled away. They feel judged. They don't want necessarily people to be coming along saying, "Do you know what? You've lost some weight there. You must be feeling great now." And I've had patients come and tell me, nearly crying, that they find that very upsetting. They don't want people to notice. It's very private for them. So everyone is different, but everyone for sure has emotional needs that need to be met. It's a question of trying to figure out what's right for you.
I think the marrying of both for long-term success would be extremely important. So working on the psychoeducation, which you are very kindly serving up so presentably today, but also in support with a psychotherapist, I think, to do the emotional needs audit and to check in with where your basic emotional needs were being met healthily and where they were not being met healthily. And are you using your innate resources, that emotional GPS that we have, to get out into our environment and see what are we not doing in a way that we could do quite easily and cost-free and actionably to get our emotional needs met, so that maybe we wouldn't be stressed, because stress puts on weight as well, and a lack of sleep and relationships that aren't healthy, and anything that we consume, from eating and drinking to company that doesn't grow us, to relationships that are unhealthy.
Wise words, Síle, wise words. For sure. Look, I think when people have a significant weight issue, it's very, very easy to drop anchor and think, well, if I can just lose this weight, everything will be better. And life isn't like that. And it can be very distressing for patients who are very successful under GLP-1s and lose tremendous amounts of weight and who are physically way healthier. They've been substantially de-risked in terms of risk of stroke or heart disease and so on. They've made fantastic physical progress, but often there's a very significant lag in terms of their overall well-being. As I say, in terms of how other people relate to them physically, day to day, and that's in different areas of their life, be that socially, work colleagues, family, and as you say, maybe sometimes people attach too much significance to that your weight does not define. We're not defined by a set of numbers, whether that's leaving cert results or whether it is with numbers on a weighing scale or a blood pressure number. Numbers don't define our value as people. Yeah. And that's just as true when we talk about weight.
Yeah, I think the efficacy overall would require or be really well met by the two being done together. Yeah. And if it can be done outside of a professional space, so be it. Walk with a friend. Do the blue zones thing. Have a walk with a friend. Make that your Maui, your little group, your trust circle. Have a chat about how you're feeling. Make sure that you're not stuffing sad things or upsetting things into your shadow and just carrying it with you, because you'll set down weight for protection in that case as well. So I think as you're lighter of mind and soul, you have good company and a food first approach to life, I would imagine a lot of weight issues will sort themselves out, notwithstanding the fact that there is evidence around the fact that obesity is considered a disease, and we have to be so mindful and careful of that, because we're kind of chatting here about people choosing to go. We've slipped into the space where we're talking not even so much about diabetes type 2 or obesity, rather people who are perhaps choosing, of their own volition to go on this, maybe to lose that extra stone or 2 stone that they just find it hard to lose. So we're proposing prescribing lifestyle medicines definitely in those cases first, and then even if you're on the meds, very wise to do it as well.
I'm very passionate on that topic. I absolutely agree with you. Certainly, again, back to that idea of the seesaw, the risk versus benefit equation. If somebody has a small amount of weight to lose, might be big, might be a half a stone, might be even a whole stone. That might be a big deal to that person, but clinically, in terms of your risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke, diabetes, your doctor, and looking at your blood workup, will be looking at you and probably saying you are not a candidate for a GLP-1. The risk versus benefits don't make sense. Just to keep in mind there as well, that again, we live in a kind of what I call a caffeinated society now, where we're inclined to look for a quick fix, a pill for every ill, if you will, and sometimes the answer is in front of our nose, and we do need to keep it simple, stupid, and of course we should look always to hit a small lump with a small hammer. So lifestyle-wise, whether it's emotional support, whether it is relationships, whether it is social activities, whether it is sporting activities, any incremental positive steps you can take in your lifestyle that are good for you. If it's good for you overall, it's probably going to be good for your health. And would always encourage people to try and meet their needs themselves and not to be looking to maybe over-medicalize something, or particularly just because you've seen it on social media or because the Kardashians say it's great or whatever, I
know. We definitely live in an over-drugified world, I think. Sure. And the quick fix that you reference is so relevant at exactly this point in our conversation, because I think even if you think about ultra-processed people and the ultra-processed world in which we live, how did it happen that big food got in behind there and got so clever and they could outsmart us? If you think back to the 50s when women entered the workplace and they were busier and the lifestyle at home had to change, big food got in there very quickly and they made quick, TV dinners available, and they blindsided us. Yeah. And then and we've become ultra processed people quietly, slowly over a period of time, and when we're not understanding the correlation between both. Yeah. Whereas food is data. What we eat is telling our body how we should be.
Yeah.
And if we even just hold space with that, we can probably kick the need for a prescription down the road, even a bit, even just to be more informed.
Yeah. Absolutely. Food is medicine. And nothing is unconditionally good for you, whether it is vitamins, minerals. So food so life is all about balance. So food from first principles. And what I mean by first principles, the way it comes out of the ground, you can trust a carrot, right? Because it's a carrot and you wash it and you cook it. And if you don't use it, after a few days, it starts to go off. If you buy something in a tin or a packet and you look at the back of it and the expiry date tells you it doesn't expire for 2.5 years, I don't know what's in it, but whatever's in it is a lot more than the actual nutrition that you need. There's loads of chemicals and preservatives, and we're just healthier with food from first principles. And
I love that analogy. And I'm thinking a moment for Sophie Morris when I hear that, because she has taken us all, like you, in the last year or so online to places we didn't even know existed when it comes to checking for labels, checking for ingredients on labels.
Don't start me on labels.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. Listen, we live in people need to realise this. But no, thankfully, I think the average Irish consumer is pretty savvy. But obviously there's exceptions to that rule too, even. So you can go to any supermarket today and you can pick up a jar of honey. We all know what a jar of honey looks like. That yellow syrupy liquid, right? And you can legally market honey in any country in Europe. The EU legislation provides for it, as long as it has 9% honey. Imagine that. A jar of honey, right? If it's 100 mils, you'll have 9 mils of honey and you've got 91 mils of corn syrup and other nonsense. So this is the world we live in, right? Whether we like it or not, where food producers, processed food producers, are either they're lawfully lying to us. They're, because when I look at the word honey, what that just says to me, if I take off my pharmacist cap for a minute, what that just says to me as a person is, well, that's honey. I think honey comes out of a beehive and I can put it on a bit of toast and it should taste nice. But really, I'm drinking a jar of sugar. It's corn syrup. It's not the same thing. And this dishonesty prevails throughout the processed food industry. And so we have to be very, very circumspect about where we get our foods and indeed where we get our supplements. Because labeling that complies with the law has a lot of small fine print, and it's not always enough. So you need to be very, very circumspect. And the thing I'm emphasizing here today is if your primary focus, as much as you can, if you're sticking with food from first principles, you can't go too far wrong.
For sure, that's fantastic. And we can be savvy, because we can look things up nowadays, and we look things up in ways that don't serve us. So let's use our capacity to look things up in ways that do serve us.
Yes.
That's definitely something that we can educate ourselves on. Like palm oil, who knew? We did not know. You're eating a bar of chocolate and it's dark. So you think, well, I'm on the really healthy option, but not if it's riddled with palm oil.
Correct.
And there are better options. So that's a small piece of knowledge that is useless to you until you use it.
Yeah, and we need to support each other. We need to socialise these messages. Yeah. And so I think that's really, really important.
Amazing. And a beautiful segue into our discussion on supplements. So you mentioned there how careful we need to be about even supplementing. And, you and I chatted before we came on air about the fact that sometimes supplements are regulated within a food market. Am I right in saying that, Tom?
Yeah. So, we do, we have to be very, very careful. We were just, whether it is food or food supplements, to be thinking about, what am I doing here? Why am I buying this? What's it for? Is it safe? Is it appropriate for me? And that's kind of the framework. That's the kind of thought process that I would have. Now, as a pharmacist, and indeed I don't consider myself special in this regard. I'm sure the vast majority of pharmacists, if not all the pharmacists in Ireland, up and down the country, recommend supplements that are evidence-based and products that they believe in. Generally speaking, pharmacies will source products they'll be prudent in where they get them from, products that they can trust, quality products. But it is a problem that food supplements are technically foods. So they're governed by food regulations. So they come underneath the regulatory authority, which is the Food Safety Authority of Ireland. So anyone can market a food as long as your labelling requirements comply with what's required. It's kind of a self-certification process. You can't make any special nutritional claims about the product that would imply medicinal benefits unless you've got proof. And but the big concern about supplements would be, so we have lots of food supplements which are on the marketplace where they're perfectly compliant labels. They're nutritional food supplements, but we have to be very circumspect about the quality control, because too many times we see scenarios where what's supposed to be in the product isn't actually what's in it. And so these products aren't medicines, and they're not regulated as medicines. So they're not regulated by the Health Products Regulatory Authority. So if I produce a product and I make a medicinal claim on the label, I have to be able to prove to the HPRA that the product is safe. I have to be able to prove it scientifically that it's effective, and I've all of these requirements to meet. And so you don't have to prove the efficacy or even the safety of your food before you market. When you market a food, by placing the product on the market, you are basically implicitly saying this is safe to use. It's kind of like self-certification. So that's a problem. But that's only one problem. The other problem then is, we have a supplements market where so you have products on the market on the shelf that the labeling is sufficiently bland that the product doesn't make any crazy claims. But then the problem is that in an online environment or on social media, where you have micro-influencers or celebrity endorsements, and where you have crazy stuff, where you have all sorts of, unsubstantiated claims being made about the benefits of these products, and then you've got a willing audience, maybe a vulnerable audience in many cases. So I'll give you one example. Take biotin for hair loss. So biotin is a big fancy word. Sounds fancy, right? So biotin is just one of the B vitamins. So B complex is a bunch of B vitamins. So biotin is just one of the B vitamins, okay? Doesn't sound half as fancy when I say just one of the B vitamins, right? So you will meet biotin in meat. You will get it in eggs, and I could go on and on and on. So biotin is readily available in food, right? Almost nobody needs to supplement with biotin. There is no clinical evidence that meets the required threshold of scientific data to substantiate that biotin is of any use to treat hair loss. Now, so really what you're buying there is expensive urine, Síle. Expensive urine. But not only that, if you're supplementing with biotin, typically these products have very, very high content, very high dosages of biotin. And if you're taking very, very high dosages of biotin, one of the dangers, again, imagine somebody is buying supplements online or whatever, and maybe they don't think it's important to mention it to their doctor, and they're going along to their doctor and they're having a checkup. Large dose biotin supplements actually compromises the lab results. So if you're on L-troxin, like we were talking earlier on, levothyroxine, and if you're having your thyroid hormones checked, or if you're having other hormone levels checked, or you're having cardiac markers checked, those lab results are going to be compromised. The results are going to be wrong because of your biotin. Mm-hmm. And again, the key thing is, does your doctor know? Does your pharmacist know? And so knowledge is power. And so this is the kind of thing that I found what I found on social media in the last while is my communication style is very simple. Keep it simple, stupid is what I like to say. And I try to talk to people in ordinary, everyday words about whatever it is they're asking me about. And what I'm finding is it's a little bit disappointing in that, telling people the truth, just telling people simple, honest truth is turning out to be a disruptive marketing strategy. I can't believe the level of engagement that we've had, and I'm very appreciative of all the support. And indeed, it's very telling as well. The amount of dietitians and chartered physiotherapists and doctors and pharmacists who are in my network now, who are followers, who message with me, who I dialogue with. And again, and we're all keeping each other going as well, because it can in the commercial environment we live in, there's an awful lot of selling going on for the sake of selling. And I just want to tell people, if I can take the opportunity here today, that if anyone is trying to get you to buy a subscription to vitamins, please don't do it. It's not in your interest. That first part of the supermarket you go into, where the fruit and veg are, spend it there. Okay, I have no agenda. Please spend your money on food.
I want to give you an applause. It's fantastic. And it's so important to hear it from you, because we don't know necessarily. We can be blindsided by the colour and the effervescence, the collective effervescence online about the effects the optics will tell us are happening of, from taking these vitamins or supplements or whatever. And you're right, it's being flogged by whomever for their own benefit, but it's colourful.
And sometimes even the people that are on social media flogging these products, they're actually having them made themselves by contract manufacturers, and they're referring to, like, sometimes they're referred to a study, and the study they're referring to, it's like there's a difference between reading the Beano and reading the Irish Times. You'll see studies where they're not really of a sufficient standard. They're compromised because they're either funded by the manufacturer, complete conflict of interest, or they're a tiny study, there's no placebo group, or there's no randomization. So as healthcare professionals, the reason why doctors and pharmacists and physiotherapists and dietitians, these are all regulated professions. We're highly regulated, and it's for the good of the public. And our job is to give people professional advice that they can trust. And so it's disappointing when we see people leveraging big words and sciencey terminology and referring to dubious studies and using it as a means of flogging products. And so it's something I'm very passionate about. But primarily, we do have people in Ireland every year. Thankfully, it's not too many, but we do have people ending up in medical difficulties, having health problems from supplementation. Food, nothing is unconditionally good for you. Food supplements are there to address a deficiency. So even if it was only vitamin D, so if you like, from the middle of November to St. Patrick's Day, roughly, the HSE, it's public policy that in Ireland it's so dark, we've so little sunlight on our skin. It makes sense to supplement vitamin D for that portion of time because we're lacking in it. And it's so important for mood. It's so important for your immune system. It's so important for your skin, hair, nails, bones, teeth. It's really important. But if somebody asks me, do I need any supplement? The first thing I'll say, I don't know. Do you? Are you deficient? Because if the definition of a supplement is to address a deficiency. So if I'm not deficient, I don't need to supplement. Mm-hmm. And if you are thinking about supplementing, start with food. And maybe start, when you go to
other lifestyle things as well. Exactly. That's where the whole conversation dovetails then.
Not medicalising, starting.
Yeah, exactly. And over-prescribing and over-medicalising. Because even as you say that, I'm thinking about D, as I've read that it's actually a parahormone, that because we do have it in our system, that it's not even a vitamin. So therefore, there's a jury's out on that one even a little bit, that if you're getting enough, I suppose, sunlight before screen light in the morning, and if you're out in nature and doing your gardening and ordinary things to keep you fit and healthy and well, yes, that you will be photosynthesizing, is it? Or I'm not sure if I'm using the right terminology, that as long as that we're making it in our own bodies. So it's not actually really a vitamin. And in terms of whether or not we supplement, we'd probably really need to try all of these other cost-free protocols before we go to that.
Correct. So from pretty much, depending on how the weather goes year to year, it's not looking great at the minute, but typically from the middle of March till up in the middle of November, most people don't need vitamin D supplements because, like you say, there'll be direct sunlight available. If you get out there, do that 30 minutes, get a bit of direct sunlight on your skin, you'll feel better. It's good for your mood. It's good for a quiet time, a bit of time on your own. Just pound the footpath for 30 minutes, yeah.
It's good for everything, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
when you
it
as
is.
you keep it stupid simple, is that what you said? Or simple
Keep it
stupid?
simple, stupid, yeah, that's it,
it's a fantastic, it's a Thomism that we all need to use, because it reminds us that if we look back to, we'll say, what our grannies survived, and I know the world has changed, I'm not being, silly altogether, but the world is a different place, but people a couple of generations ago were healthy, relatively, well, and they ate very simply, and they just ate when they were hungry. And that said, they didn't have the cars that we have. They weren't stopping at the garage to get the petrol and seeing the multicolour array when they go in to pay for it.
That's
and,
for sure.
Getting triggered by the very inviting colour before they even think about the food, and sort of passively buying and then eating off your lap on the way home. I mean, all of those things are empty calories, really. We're not going to be burning them off. But if we go back to that place that you've suggested, just getting out in Mother Nature, Holy God's garden, just having a walk, preferably in quality company or quality solitude. There is a difference between that and feeling lonely on your own, and just chatting and talking and taking in your sunlight. It has so many positive effects on your health and your wellness, and probably some of the other chronic ailment that we might feel is an issue for us may not be such a huge big issue if we address it from that very simple standpoint.
Yes, absolutely. The best of healthcare is intervening at the earliest point possible. Personal responsibility, as you say, that little bit of activity. So if you're looking at making a change, just manage the ask. Give yourself a small little target. Maybe you're time poor and you're struggling to get exercise in, but maybe you also want to meet a pal. Maybe you could do the two things together. You know what I mean? Instead of meeting up with somebody for a coffee, maybe bring a coffee flask with you, and the two of you go for a walk and have a chat at the same time. So it's just about trying to do things differently and making small incremental improvements in your lifestyle. You touched on something very important there, though. Yeah, we definitely are living in more sedentary times with the advent of cars, and I jokingly refer to my two daughters now as lifted and landed. You know what I mean? And it's so different from when I was growing up as a child, and that has changed so much. So yeah, it's very important to try and be active for as much for your mind as it is for your body, but it's very important for bone density as well. So.
Because they do say that sitting is the new smoking, and that we need to be standing up every 15 minutes, even if that's all that we do. If we're working at our desk, stand up and sit down. It's
very important for your bone density. Yeah. Again, as we get a little bit older, and we were talking about GLP-1 patients or patients who are menopausal, when bone density wanes, so that activity is going to help preserve any increase in activity is going to help preserve your bone density, and it's good for your bone health, and it's definitely good for the mind.
It is, of course. And our bones am I right in saying that our bones have hormones within? So as there's a chemical response to everything that we do. So if we stand with intent, rise out of our chair with intent, even if that's all we do 10 times a day, it's as good as some of the small exercises you might do in the gym, like not using your arm rest, like standing with intent. Is it?
Yeah. So there's a catchphrase for that. Use it or lose it. Okay. So as we get older, we have to become more careful about the skeletal health, or how healthy our skeleton is. 2 points of view there. One is for our quality of life, range of movement, so that we can stay independent as long as possible. You want to look after your range of movement of your joints. And you're going to stop getting stiff, prevent getting stiff joints rather, by moving about, right? And heel striking. When you walk, you're walking along, and the activity of walking or doing something, that all helps to keep your bones strong. But of course, there's a dietary side to that. You need calcium, you need vitamin D, you need vitamin K2 in your diet. But these are all in ordinary foods. So just food is medicine. Eat well and try and be active. And if you can do those things, that will really help preserve bone health. And yeah, I think I think there's a lot people can be doing for themselves,
and
as
to do
well
that
as their
first.
doctor.
Yes, of course. What else would you find yourself I was going to say prescribing, but what's my language? Dispensing on a daily basis. What about statins?
Statins, yeah. So statins are they're very, very frequently prescribed. Statins are prescribed to help reduce cholesterol. So if you think of the Calgon ad on telly, it's the way I like to describe it to patients to make it relatable. If you think of the old dishwasher ad and they tell you the Calgon comes along and it helps to clear out the pipes. So when we get blockages, arteriosclerotic blockages in our blood vessels, so we can get plaques of cholesterol building up, causing blockages, and this can lead to cardiovascular disease and it can lead to strokes. So if we have the bad cholesterol is called LDL. That's the one we don't like. We want to get that one as low as possible. And there's a good cholesterol called HDL, high density lipoprotein. And so with statins, your doctor will have identified a patient. The patient has their LDL levels are too high, their total cholesterol profile isn't right, and it's putting them at risk. And in prescribing a statin, what your doctor is doing, the doctor is trying to de-risk you. It's trying to reduce your risk of having a stroke or a heart attack and trying to get your LDL levels down. And obviously, in doing that, we always encourage the patient not to think of that as, it's not the statin's job to do it on their own. You've got to do your bit too. You don't want your cholesterol levels to be coming down despite what you're doing, okay? You want it coming down all the faster because you're helping yourself as well.
For sure. So going on it with a view to coming off it, would that be the best
it
mentality?
Depends.
If you can.
There's kind of two categories of patients. Some patients need statins because they need a lifestyle intervention and it's taken them decades to screw it up, but they've eventually gotten there and it's self-inflicted. But then there's another category of patients altogether who could be slim and trim as a whippet and they have serious cholesterol problems, and because they're just unlucky genetically that their liver manufactures too much cholesterol. So when we're asleep at night, our body our liver sleep is restorative, as we know. The organs in our body do different things when we're asleep, but your liver manufactures the predominant amount of your cholesterol needs at night. Cholesterol is actually a hormone, and it's a very important hormone, and our bodies consume about 3 grams of it a day. And we need it. And we need it. We do need it. But the problems arise where your liver is making way more than you need. So there's 2 sources of cholesterol. You can get it from what you're putting into your body. You can be eating cholesterol from various food sources, and your body will manufacture it itself. So some people have problems because their dietary lifestyle is poor and they're intaking a lot of cholesterol. And other people are just unlucky in that their bodies are making too much cholesterol. So some patients need statins for life. Other patients, they can have a medical intervention. Something might happen to them and they get a warning. They get told, you're overweight, you're pre-diabetic, you need this, you need that. And, they put in the hard yards, they can come out of that and, yes. And they can dramatically de-risk their profile. So, so statins aren't always for life. But for a lot of patients, they are for life. And it's about reducing your risk of having a stroke or a heart attack. And, as I say, keep that picture of the Calgon ad.
Yeah, it's a really good one. I made the mind movie there and it was very effective. I'm concerned, though, as I'm listening to you, Tom, about repeat prescriptions then without a return. And I know repeat prescriptions don't happen, I think, incessantly. I think after a certain period of time, you have to go back to your doctor. Because I think then... I think it'd be really important for people to even have an outlook or a mindset of going on something with a view to coming off it, if they possibly can. So the day and hour it's prescribed, accepted for all the right reasons, with the informed consent, and all of the things that we've already discussed, and taking all of, those cost-free actionables into your action plan as well. But all the while considering, I will do this as an intervention, with a view to try going without it as soon as I possibly can.
It's about I suppose all the advice I'm giving here today is intended as educational. It's not patient specific, and it's generalized by nature. Every patient scenario is different. So there are patients who, because of their genetic profile, when they have blood tests, the doctors can know this patient absolutely is in trouble and will be in trouble if they don't take it, and is going to need statin for life. And there are other patients who are in a very different scenario. So there isn't a one size fits all answer.
Sure.
But
I have a question for you too.
Yeah.
Is there a connection between our bodies making too much of the low density lipoprotein and hardening of the arteries? So smoking. So if a person is thin on the outside, fat on the inside, so this slim build, you think couldn't possibly have cholesterol.
Oh, absolutely.
And they might decide, well, my dad had it, my granddad had it, I was bound to have it, which is never a good mindset to have, because genetics will load the gun, but lifestyle will pull the trigger.
No, absolutely. You can always make it worse. Oh, that's for sure. And I wouldn't be fatalistic about things. Just, if you've inherited a predisposition for manufacturing too much cholesterol, it's smart to take your statin. It's also smart to make good choices and to manage your lifestyle and to do what you can, and to have a healthy lifestyle from an activity point of view in terms of burning up and using cholesterol, and also from a dietary point of view, that you're actually moderating your intake of fatty foods.
So would smoking come in there as well?
Smoking is it's
a big no-no anyway.
Smoking is really it's a grenade in the body, and even the one where the big societal problem we're storing up for the next few decades, vaping. My goodness, we have an industry there that is not being sufficiently regulated, producing nicotine products that taste like sweets and smell like sweets, with names like cherry mango vape. I mean, come on. So there is a condition now called popcorn lung, where we have people who have never smoked cigarettes who are actually commencing their nicotine journey with vaping. And vaping is actually potentially way more harmful than cigarettes, because the one I'm slow to say good thing about cigarettes, it's that they're extremely regulated. So they have filters, and all of that good stuff. But the vape market is so new. We do not have that's the Wild West, and we do not have regulation of it. And it's frightening. We have all sorts of blockages occurring in people's airways, and people in their early 20s in very serious trouble. And it's a nightmare.
It is a nightmare. And even how it's used now, so I know that, well, I don't know actually, but I don't imagine that it's illegal to vape indoors. I know it's not happening as much now as it did before. But up until a couple of years ago, I can recall actually being in a restaurant where somebody was vaping beside me, and I felt ill. And I'm not a complainer, but I absolutely had to draw it to the attention of the waiting staff, because I wouldn't have been able to finish my meal. I found it vile. And I just found it really vulgar as well that people would do that.
It's very insensitive and very inconsiderate of other people, isn't it?
So things might have changed since then. I'm not sure. I haven't experienced it in a pub or a restaurant since then. But I'm concerned about the fact that I absolutely have seen vapes going on a table. So standing up, being put on a table where people are having drinks, and somebody else, I'm going to suggest random, just lifting it, having a puff of it and putting it back, and that seeming to be okay. Yeah,
well, that's a hygiene issue there as well. That there's nothing okay about any of that, is there? Yeah,
at so many levels, it was so wrong. And then another thing I've observed is that it would be lifted off the table by its owner, preferably, so maybe slightly less offensive in the hygiene department, and going into their pocket, no lid, no top. So to gather all of the pocket fluff and whatever. Not to mention, as you say, what it's doing to our lungs and teeth and oral hygiene and oral microbiome and skin microbiome. I mean, it
doesn't bear thinking.
It does not bear thinking about.
Like smoke, like it's we were talking about food supplements, and like smoking is so bad for your skin, and people want to look well and stay looking young. I mean, if you want to help yourself, smoke less or don't smoke at all. Drink plenty of water. Make sure you've got vitamin C in your diet. Vitamin C is so good for your skin and so important. But just, you don't need it. Just make sure you've got plenty of citrus fruits in your diet. So vitamin C, water, don't smoke. Get get sunlight on your skin, get outdoors, and again, be careful with it. Obviously, with ultraviolet light, and look at the UV factor for the day. Use SPF, but there's the secret sauce to having healthy skin.
Keeping it very basic. And
very basic, but very predictable. And it's not a very sexy message. And no one can make a whole pile of money flogging you that message, but it works.
I know. I wonder as well, Tom, I'm just wondering, I remember speaking to somebody who was prescribed the pill now she was in a relationship, it suited her anyway. I'm not sure whether that was why she went to her doctor, but she also had her poor skin at the time. Her skin was breaking out. Yeah. She was at a time in her life and she was in a relationship and maybe hoping to buy a house and stressful time in her life. So skin, stress, but that wasn't looked at. The pill was prescribed and I suppose it suited her at a couple of levels because obviously managing family and whatever. And she felt that she was on the pill really at that stage to clear up her skin.
Yeah.
11 years later, she was still on the same pill.
Yeah.
And when she came, she feared, because she always feared that going off it would mean, so she kicked her family back quite a while. That suited her, that worked for her.
Right.
I'm not sure if it would have, been interrupted more naturally at a previous time if she was planning a family.
So but fear of the skin symptoms coming back or preventing her from stopping.
It was marketed in all the wrong way, I feel. What do you make of that?
Yeah. Well, so that's a patient-specific scenario, and I don't have all of the background, but I'll give you my rudimentary thoughts on it. So these pills are hormone products. They're prescription-only products, and so you can only get them in Ireland by going to a doctor and being prescribed them under the medical supervision of a doctor. A lot of contraceptive pills can quite safely be used at low dosage. Now, certain ones are more used for skin issues than others. And so depending on lifestyle factors, like you say, this young woman and wasn't planning on having any children anytime soon, there are lots of young women who are using a contraceptive pill, making choices about controlling their body for a number of years. But generally speaking, and maybe people don't read leaflets enough, and that's probably part of it as well. But every one of these products has a patient information leaflet, and normally, whether the message is heard or whether it's forgotten, generally speaking, patients are advised with long-term use of a pill to make a point of having a break. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you wouldn't like to see somebody taking a pill back to back and doing that for several years. It's important to have a break now and then, just to make sure that your cycle works normally and all of that. And again, so these products are prescribed and they're intended to be used under medical supervision. Now, the world we live in today, there's all sorts of online things and things of it. So there's all sorts of ways of maybe accessing products, and just I would encourage people to be very, very careful about where they get their advice. And I'd encourage them just certainly advice specific to Ireland anyway. I would encourage you your local GP is the person to talk to about your prescription needs, and it's always a good idea to go back and have a review. Generally speaking, even repeat prescriptions for things like contraceptives, they're typically prescribed for maybe 6 months at a go, or rarely longer than that. And it would be quite normal for somebody to go. If somebody's young and violently healthy, they mightn't see a doctor too often for many other reasons. But we typically, you would find somebody in front of the doctor at least twice a year for something like that. And again, the other aspect of that, in terms of regular use of a contraceptive, we check. There's a check for blood pressure. So part and parcel of getting a prescription for a contraceptive pill would involve a blood pressure check to make sure that everything's okay. But you're making a really important point. Like, so because of aesthetics and how we look, and that's not necessarily to discount it, because you know what, how we look does affect how we feel.
Oh, of course, without a doubt.
What I mean?
Yes. But psychodermatology is important to consider as well. The work what else is going on for us? What's going on under the hood? We chatted before we went on air about an article that I think that I've done with Brains that's going live today, and it discusses that in my life, that sense of how you look and how you feel about how you look, and your self-esteem being associated with how you perceive you'll be received, and that affecting your confidence. And all of those things are really important conversations to have in the whole space of aesthetics.
Yeah. And they're intertwined, for sure.
And age positive comes in there as well, you know, that the gift of acceptance and the art of acceptance. And that's not giving in. It's not surrendering or accepting less than, but it's working from a point of acceptance towards your mind-derived health optimization.
Totally. Look, listen, there's no doubt about it. When I wake up in the morning and I wake up, in my head, I'm still 17, right? Then I move and my low back gives me a bit of an ache, and that brings me back to reality real quick, right? So, but you know, when I walk past the mirror, you know, I'm no oil painting, but you know what? I feel good, and you know, so I think we live in a world where between magazines and imagery and the whole Hollywood effect, you know, body beautiful, that there's a perfect aesthetic that nobody can live up to, and I you know, and I would just encourage people not to take themselves too seriously in that regard. You know, by all means, do the best for yourself as you can and make yourself feel good. And if dressing up and putting on a bit of makeup makes you feel great, brilliant. You know what I mean? Anything that's going to help you feel good is good.
The non-invasive enhancements.
Obviously. Oh my God, yes. Non-invasive, yes. Non-invasive enhancements. You know, day-to-day things, whether it is brushing your hair if you still have it, or, you know, whatever, or using a moisturizer, or what, you know, whatever. I think people, you know, should find ways to feel good about themselves.
Sure.
And we're all going to age. There's none of us getting out of this thing alive, right?
Amazing. So tell me then about, I think it's interesting that you talk about how Instagram and social media has made things popular and popularized supplements, as we say, and various aesthetics that we may not have known about. And we're kind of, we're blindsided and sucked in there. What about the rebranding of ADHD as well? I reposted a piece by Brian Keane yesterday, a fantastic personal trainer and mental health advocate, I think. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure about Brian's labels, but he's a great guy. I think he's a great guy.
I don't know
From
myself,
out here looking in, he looks like a great guy. And he has a lovely story. He's a very relatable, real person. I like listening to his content. But he made a funny little quip about the fact that, you know, in the rebranding of ADHD, he doesn't now have to look back in sadness or anger and see himself as just the giddy boy who couldn't settle down and couldn't do his work and didn't fit perfectly into the school model of the time. Mm-hmm. And it speaks to the whole space in which we find ourselves at the moment, where a lot of people are self-diagnosing ADHD and neurodiversity and getting ADHD diagnoses. And I'm wondering about whether or not you find yourself dispensing medication more recently for ADHD.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. It definitely, we are seeing a lot more prescriptions for ADHD medication. That's a growing trend. There's no doubt about that. But the kind of the lens through which I would see it is that, you know, our mental health services in Ireland have been profoundly underfunded, intergenerationally. So we have, you know, crisis after crisis of lack of resources, lack of psychiatrists, lack of psychologists, lack of therapists. We have a profound backlog of patients needing care, and all sorts of care, not just the prescription pad. The process of diagnosing ADHD or neurodivergency of any type has evolved quite a bit, and so generally speaking, that involves psychiatrists, and again, there aren't a fraction enough of them here. In our public health service, people are waiting years to be seen in our public health service, and you know, you can have young children who are manifesting with serious what seems like behavioural problems, which are proving extremely disruptive at school and very different to siblings and parents struggling and so on, and where there's a suspicion that maybe maybe there's an issue here. And, you know, in our public system, that poor family with that child could well be waiting a couple of years or a long time to be seen and to have an evaluation. Now, a clinical evaluation these days involves seeing a psychiatrist, and it can often take, you know, it could be a 2-3 hour consultation, and it could be 1 or 2 visits, and it's quite a detailed process. So we are seeing more resources being committed into that space. So there's definitely an awful lot more people being diagnosed, but I don't believe my own experience would tell me that they're not being misdiagnosed, or there isn't an overdiagnosis of ADHD that I'm aware of, but more so that there's a backlog. So what I'm seeing now, because there's more awareness, what I'm seeing now is I'm seeing scenarios where children, maybe 10, 12 years of age, are finally having their consultations with their mental health care practitioners, the psychiatrists. They're having an evaluation, and maybe they have a diagnosis, and it can be very upsetting for a whole family when that happens. And
yet very soothing as well to know that there's something that, and
for sure,
and it won't be
answers.
It won't need to be medicated. Well, I suppose what I should ask rather than presume, because I don't know. Does it all need to be medicated, or are there other ways?
Yeah, so it's not all about the prescription pad, for sure. So there's all sorts of therapies out there. The non-medical treatments aren't very well resourced in Ireland, and so whether it is autism, AU, ADHD, or whichever part of the spectrum we're talking about, there are non-medical treatments that are part of the process, and there's not enough resources there, particularly in the school space. So when children are young, we want them having positive experience in education. So that means schools should have sensory rooms. Mm-hmm. How many primary schools in Ireland have sensory rooms where, if a child is feeling overwhelmed, where they're allowed go and kind of try to self-soothe and reset? And thankfully, there are some secondary schools who have them, but it's not that common. Mm. So, and that's just basic physical stuff, right? That's before you talk about actual therapy, whether that's CBT or which is cognitive behavioral therapy, or actually seeing a psychotherapist. So there's all sorts of therapies, because neurodivergency, when it comes along and it's given a name and that somebody is diagnosed, that can be an awful lot for somebody to take on, a lot to process. Mm-hmm. And
they need to meet themselves again at that point, Tom. I find they need to
they're reevaluating,
themselves.
They're re-understanding, they're reimagining their life to date through the lens of their diagnosis. And sometimes patients can really benefit from having a bit of help with that. Yeah. So it can be a very difficult thing to be trying to do on your own. And the other thing is collateral damage from neurodivergency that hasn't been supported, hasn't been diagnosed, is we've a lot of patients who have ADHD who suffer with anxiety or some depression, and these are kind of related issues. Mm-hmm. So you have somebody growing up and all they know is they are different, they feel different, and the school environment or the classroom as it's set up is not
Isn't
really
a good fit for them.
It's not set up for neurodivergency. Yeah. It's not tolerant of diversity, and so it's gamed against them, and so it's a struggle. So it's stressful.
Yes.
So it's more difficult, and they know they're struggling. And why am I struggling? And they're not struggling. And they're all psychological scars, aren't they? And like years later, then when you might be 5-10 years later or whatever, and you suddenly have a diagnosis. And as I was just relating there, you could have somebody 10, 12 years of age has a diagnosis, and it's an awful lot for mum and dad to process. And then you know what? then they turn around and realize, maybe Johnny didn't lick it up off the stones. And, I have lots of scenarios where I've had conversations with mums and dads who have gone on to have an assessment themselves, and they have a diagnosis, and it can be very, very overwhelming. But not everyone requires medication. Like, if I have a headache, I could have a mild headache, I could have a moderate headache, I could have a severe headache, I could have a migraine, or I could have debilitating cluster migraines. So neurodivergency, you've got people who are very high functioning, they've got ADHD, a lot of people consider that a superpower.
Of course, it's not a deficit. Absolutely.
Exactly.
I think that's so important.
And I think it's very important that it's just different.
Yeah.
And God, it would be terrible if we were all the bloody same.
For sure. And it's interest over importance. It's when you just understand that, you realise how I did it was different to other people. It doesn't mean that I'm not clever or I'm not smart just because I didn't do it the way that the mean in the classroom did it, or I approach my adult work and life in a different way to other people and relationships. Sensitivity dysphoria is huge amongst people with ADHD, and I think when you understand that as a major symptom, that alone can medicate without a prescription. Just to understand, there's nothing wrong. I'm not broken. My brain is not broken. I just have a rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And if you look at the situation that you're in that's causing you concern through that lens and realise that's what I'm having an episode of that rather than this being a really bad situation, it can just give you perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when people have self-awareness, when they learn something new about themselves and they have enhanced self-awareness, that really helps them. That help, and for me, it's about learning how to self-soothe, and it's about empowering people. So the reality is, everyone's different. Everyone's good at different things. As I was saying earlier, you're not defined by a set of numbers. Yeah. So if you don't get 600 points in your leaving cert, so what? You know what I mean? There's a lot to life other than just numbers, and people have things they're good at and things that they're not good at. Some people have fantastic hand-eye coordination and they'll be gifted hurlers, whatever. So, and neurodivergency, so some people are really, really brilliant lateral thinkers and they're great problem solvers, or they're really good problem solvers because they see patterns differently. So I think it's very important. The way we re-understanding ADHD and neurodivergency these days, it's not really. I certainly don't look at it as a disease or as somebody being disabled. It's just somebody who is different from whatever normal is. And if you look at it really, if you look at the so-called spectrum, everyone's on the spectrum. It's just about where you are.
Absolutely.
I mean, we have arbitrarily decided that normal is from here to here. Yeah. You know what I mean? And who's to say that's where the thermostat should be? Absolutely. And
and within every day, if mental health is a line, on every single solitary day, every one of us will be in a different place on that line at a different time in the day.
Oh, yeah.
So we're moving up and down the mental health line as such ourselves, all of us, every day, whether we have a diagnosis or not.
Oh, look, we're all sentient people and we're not robots.
Yeah.
And we're affected by our environment. And
how we respond to it is what matters as well. So the resilience over a while. So not every diagnosis needs to be medicated. That's a really important point. And it's equally important then to bring in the lifestyle conversation again, the psychoeducation around understanding what this diagnosis can do for you, that it's happening for you, not to you. Just holding space. And as you say, adult diagnoses happening nowadays on the rise, particularly maybe when children have a diagnosis, then adults begin to see things through a different lens.
So you could have one person in a family, you could have one child in a family who is having difficulty functioning in a school environment that precipitates a diagnosis that results in other siblings having a diagnosis and a parent having a diagnosis. And, no two people are the same, even within the same family. And everyone will manifest their neurodivergency differently.
Sure.
And not everyone needs medication, and and that certainly would be very much like so. The diagnosis these days, it's almost exclusively done by psychiatrists. These are experts in this field, and so that whole assessment involves understanding the degree of where they're at, and working with the patient with regard to what their therapeutic goals are, and how they want to approach managing what they're learning. An awful lot of adults, if you're 40 years of age plus, being told that figuring out that that you're neurodivergent, you've learned all sorts of coping skills along the way already, and then what's the point?
Well, yeah, but it's lovely to know that, though. It's never too late to know. Information's
never a burden, is it?
It's never, and it's just a lovely space to it's a bicep curl for your brain to research something. I always say research is me search in relation to the many iterations of me. I'm in the third chapter, the third act, and my third career, and I'm loving it. I'm absolutely not done yet. Older, not over, that's my mantra. And from that perspective as well, the more we know, the more we're informed to go and do some more research, and we'll always find what we need. When the lesson is needed, the teacher will always appear. So we're now you and I are having an ADHD informed conversation. We have recently, the world over, been having trauma informed conversations. Everything is better than it was before, and when we do know better, we do better.
Yeah.
So it's all pointing in the right direction, which brings me back then to the whole idea of what we dispense in pharmacies and how we can have that other conversation with ourselves and our families and our pharmacists and our care practitioners around, is there another way before we medicate? So when I was chatting with you in advance of the interview, you were saying that your pharmacy is stripped bare. You literally dispense your medications and you give quality information in a very relatable way.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. So, it's a long number of years ago now. I suppose most pharmacies kind of have a front of counter retail area where there's a variety of different products, and as the pharmacy got busier and busier, I just and the footprint of the store was not huge, so I just got to a point where I just fecked out almost all of the retail. The only front of counter product categories that I decided to keep was first aid, some basic medicated skincare, supplements, and some feminine hygiene products. And after that, everything is consultation room, over-the-counter medicines, and dispensary services. And I kind of reconstituted my team as well. So everyone who works for me is either a pharmacist, a pharmaceutical technician, a pharmacist intern, or a trainee pharmaceutical technician. So we really focus on core services, and we do all the vaccination services, and we spend a lot of time talking to our patients as best we can about what they want to talk about or how to use their medicine. And it's easier to do that, I think, when you don't have all of the retail stuff as well,
everything from handbags to perfumes
So if you want perfume or nail scissors,
go elsewhere.
I just say Dundrum is down the road, lads.
Yes.
So
yeah. Would you ever have clinics in your pharmacy then for
We do vaccination clinics, yeah. So yes, so like any activities consume resources, right? So sometimes if we're having a planned event and you'll need a second pharmacist on duty, or extra support staff, an extra technician. So on vaccine days, so there's information gathering, and that's kind of what led me onto social media, to be honest with you, because...
And that's how I found you.
Yeah, that's funny.
I had great confidence in you, and I absolutely love watching your content, because I know that it's coming from a place of endearment to people that you don't even know, but you can feel an energy, even digitally. You know when something is
very kind
faux,
of you to say that.
and you know when something is real. And when you really want information and you really want it delivered crisp and clean, you don't need the bling and of what social media is delivering now. You get lost down that rabbit hole. Really, sometimes you genuinely want to know what's real. where is the community pharmacist that I could possibly ask a question of if I had a question? I'm blessed. I have very little dealings with pharmacy or doctor. I had a fabulous doctor years ago. She has retired, and her practice is merged now with a medical centre. I think that's the way the model has changed. I haven't had need for a doctor for years, thankfully. And I have very little need for a pharmacy. But when I do, because I'm in a family ecosystem, so sometimes I have to make a pickup for somebody. I work through a lovely pharmacy in Dundalk called Burns Pharmacy. They're just lovely. And I feel if I had a question, I could ask it there as well. I think the main pharmacist is Porrick. I'm not sure. Maybe it's a partnership. I don't know. But Porrick speaks Irish, and I speak Irish. And if I ever have a question, I have a lovely experience when I go there. And then I gleaned online as I watched you. It's that and then some, because there were no frills and flounces. It's just information for information's sake, and you feel that you could put in a DM and ask a question and that you'd answer.
I would, yeah. I'm not, unfortunately, I don't really have, I'm not good enough at filtering. You go, what you see is what you get. There's good and bad to that sometimes, but yeah. So, I pride myself. I think one of the main things you can do for people, if you talk about accessibility of pharmacy services, so what accessibility might, for some people it means opening hours. But for me, accessibility means a bit more. It's about how welcome do you feel to actually ask, can you have a word for a minute? Can I ask you a question? Can I talk to you in private? And I pride myself. I don't think I'm any evangelist or anything in this now. I think the vast majority, certainly of all the independent pharmacists up and down the country, I think the majority of all pharmacists actually do their best by their patients every day of the week, and we really do see that in any of the market research surveys. Pharmacists and doctors are typically right up there at the top in terms of patient satisfaction or patient trust, and most pharmacists take that trust very seriously, and there's a responsibility that comes with it. I suppose what I have found, what's different about the model, what I'm doing in my pharmacy is I've chucked out all the retail, and that's not me having a go at my competitors or my peers. It's just like, for me in my store, it just makes it much easier to operate, and we're focused on the core, and it's just, I find it easier. I find it definitely more enjoyable, and so I've taken on a unit next door, and later on this year now, we're hoping to add some dispensing automation, a robotic automation dispenser, to help improve our efficiency because of the growth in the business. So with the additional unit next door, we hope to double the footprint of the store. But to be honest with you, even with doubling the footprint, I've no intention of putting any retail in. I'm actually just going to put in more. I'm going to put in extra consultation rooms, and just make the categories that I have a little bit bigger. And looking forward to that too.
I love that model, I really do. And I know I have to let you go, but can we give Andropause a moment? We talked about menopause.
Oh, sure.
And you and I chatted about this before as well. And I had the funniest experience with Niall O'Loughlin on the show a number of episodes ago, where we talked about andropause. And in the course of my discourse, I mentioned erectile dysfunction. And Niall afterwards very comedically said, "Why did you mention erectile dysfunction in the middle of my episode?" It was the funniest moment.
Poor Niall.
We had such fun. And needless to say, it was my discourse. It was nothing to do with anything he had said or prompted. But can we give Andropause a moment? So I always remember Joe Duffy giving menopause its launch in Ireland at the time. And Grania Shoya, the beautiful Grania Shoya, had done an interview that then tagged to that in a very timely way. And it was important because so many people got the permission then to say, gosh, I've had what I thought was frozen shoulder. Gosh, I have, temperature issues. And I have. And then they realised I am in perimenopause. And then the whole Davina McCall movement spread the world over. And, people saw it as, we then understood you're either matrescence, premenopause, perimenopause, menopause for a day, and postmenopause. And you need to understand, we had the whole hormone conversation. What about our men friends?
Yeah, so So yeah, listen, I'm really delighted to talk about this one. And unfortunately, men aren't as good as women are at supporting each other and talking to each other. If a woman has a problem, she's very likely to talk around to her gal pals and ask for some help. How are you finding this? Did this happen to you too? Now, men aren't as good at that. Now, it's changing. Not before time. It's changing, but it's changing slowly. We have the advent of men's sheds now around the country, and they're certainly a help. So, andropause for men. So this is poorly understood, and it's not very well socialised. So I'm delighted to give it an airing. So there's a whole bunch of stuff here. There's a lot more to this than just erectile dysfunction. Poor Niall.
It was the funniest moment.
Yeah. So long before that, there can be a sudden drop in libido and interest in sex. And then we also have mood. We can have depression, anxiety, and you can have real decline in quality of life right across the board. Now, there's a physiological side to this as well too. Cardiovascular health, cognitive health, brain fog. So and indeed, of course, with reduced activity, we get. So just to put into technical terms for a minute, we're talking about the reducing levels of testosterone in the body. So we're all aging, and as men age, they'll typically lose 1 or 2% of testosterone a year, and some men will experience when they get to a certain age, it reaches a tipping point, and they can suddenly become symptomatic, and they can have sudden changes in their experience in their life. So a lot of men suffer in silence, which is really sad. So the first thing I want to say is I just want to give a list of all the things like I've mentioned. So if you have a reduction in your interest in having sex, if you're experiencing erectile dysfunction, if you're finding that you're just dragging yourself around and you're exhausted, I'm not talking about tired, but if you're really fatigued a lot, or if you're getting brain fog, your mood is suffering, you're just more ratty or agitated than you normally are. If any of that sounds like you, please talk to somebody. Maybe start with a friend or a family member, somebody you trust. And I would strongly encourage you to go see your doctor. Your doctor is a scientist and is an expert healthcare practitioner, and they can simply run some simple blood tests and they can determine if you have a significant testosterone deficiency. So that's kind of the related things we've talked about. There's medication there that can help with erectile dysfunction, but there's also TRT, testosterone replacement therapy. So there are pharmaceutical products there, just like there are for women, to help deal with the problem. So the first thing is awareness. We need to make people know that this is a thing. It doesn't just happen to women. Now, I know there's women out there listening today who'll be saying, can we not even have menopause and keep it to ourselves? No, you can't actually, no. So, and indeed, for all of the women out there who are listening or watching, I would very much encourage them to think about there are men in their lives, and maybe they could do with a supportive prod or a poke, and maybe ask them about how they're getting on. Maybe they have some of these symptoms. Maybe, in phraseology that men can relate to, I often say, have you had an MOT? It's time to get the NCT done, the 50,000 mile checkup,
Yes.
And if you just keep it relatable and simple, it's an affirmation. It's a good thing to go to a doctor and have a checkup, right? If you had
conversation is fabulous.
Exactly. If you had a nice car, right, you would not hesitate that when the sticker says it's time, you'd take it down to the authorised dealer, and you wouldn't bring it anywhere else, and you get it checked out. Well, your body is the very same. You only get the one. You can't recondition the engine too easily. And so when it's time for a checkup, it's smart. It's the smart play to go to a doctor. And so things are changing, I'm glad to say. But we're coming off a very low base, and it's really, really important to any opportunity we can to raise awareness. And certainly, I think women can help their partners, and they can help their fathers, and they can help raise awareness of this. And I do think we need to encourage men to talk more, because there's loads of help out there. Nobody needs to suffer in silence. And go to your doctor, have a checkup.
For sure, because it has been affecting, like there is peri andropause as well. We need to hold space for that. There's the years leading into this drop in testosterone
You
levels.
can't have that to yourselves either. We've got that as well.
I'm sharing it with you because I know how important it is, because I work obviously in mental health.
I understand.
I'm working with men who are so depressed and they don't understand why. And the most they can manage to say to me is, I've lost my mojo.
Yeah.
Help. Yeah. And then we pare it back and peel it back, and we look at chronological age, which is important, but metabolic age, biological age, they're all important factors. And it brings us back to our conversation in the beginning about what food first, how we're living our lives, what we're consuming in terms of, social media content, the music we listen to, what we read, the company we keep or don't keep, the conversations we're having or not having, remembering that our bodies are, dual fuel burning, like we're going to be burning sugar and we're going to be burning fat. So what are we eating? What do we take? Supplements as well in gyms. Aren't people getting testosterone in places they shouldn't be getting it? And protein, we won't even go there because that's a whole other conversation. But I just think, if Joe Duffy gave menopause its moment, can't we let Tom McKenna give andropause its moment in Ireland and just
absolutely
open the conversation?
Yeah, certainly. I think well, thank you for the opportunity, and fair play to you. And there is really two sides to it, and you've the mental health side of things is really, really important. I know we have Movember every November, and that's a great thing, because historically there's still too much toxic masculinity out there, and there's men of a certain age, who don't necessarily feel they can be vulnerable or feel that they can express, I'm anxious or I'm worried, and that they're not projecting this, I'm strong and I've got everything together, and that's a burden we need to take off men. Nobody's a robot, and nobody feels strong and on top of things all the time.
We're pack animals. We need each other.
No, yeah, absolutely. So the social side is very, very important. We have emotional needs that need to be met, and I think that's very, very important.
And Tom, we're all getting our basic emotional needs met, I find, every day anyway, just not always healthily. And if we can hold space for that, and we realise, well, one of our basic emotional needs is for control. But if we are not able, if we're not in control of our circumstance, perhaps if a relationship is breaking down, which can happen in mid-years, coinciding then with biological changes, metabolic changes. And maybe you don't understand that one is bleeding literally into the other. And if you don't then heal what really hurt you, you might bleed on people that didn't cut you. So this lack of control in terms of your world can come out as anger and road rage and rouse. And then it's, it's a self-professing situation of turmoil, and you blame yourself. And then it's really, I worry then for people's health and longevity at that point.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it's funny. In the consultation rooms in pharmacies up and down the country, we are seeing them increasingly in use in the last number of years, and they're getting more and more used for private consultations with patients. It never ceases to amaze me, the burdens that people are carrying around with them that they haven't had somebody to share with. It's sad. Even sometimes, just after work, even sometimes within the locality, like so, I deliver to stuff if people aren't able to get out, if they're poorly or whatever the circumstance. And sometimes when you go to somebody's door and you're chatting at the door there, and they're hanging, they're lingering, like you kind of get a sense, that this is the only conversation they've had today, and so we live in a very busy or increasingly urbanized world, but in many
And individualist. A lot of people driving
individualization
their own,
is a huge trend, driven by smartphones. We consume content when we want to.
You don't even have to pick up the phone anymore, Tom. You can book an appointment tapping your phone,
Yeah,
So then you
absolutely.
don't know how to start up a conversation. You don't know how to have a moment with somebody and have a collective effervescence just because somebody's lovely and you've got something in common. Like we had a great crack when we arrived here today.
Absolutely,
And both of us met somebody we'd never met before.
That's
and
right.
was a lovely person to meet. I mean, that's it. That's life. It doesn't get any better than that. We surely got a dopamine high out of it.
Yeah.
We were being social. We were being pro-social. And if people aren't being pro-social and practicing, as you said, if you don't use it, you lose it. It's this equally as it is with your body, your brain is a muscle. If you don't use your pro-social muscles often enough, you become antisocial over a period of time. And it's harder to come back from antisocial than it is to push through the pain barriers of being pro-social when you're feeling a little bit isolated or alone or lonely.
That's very interesting. I mean, I'm certainly seeing an awful lot of I'm seeing a lot of older people who maybe are living alone, or maybe not even living alone, but who are experiencing tremendous isolation. Mm-hmm. Even though on the face of it, they're living in a very busy environment, in busy communities. It's extraordinary to me.
They don't feel like they matter to somebody. I think I work with a lot of people in like families. There's a terrible estrangement within families now as well. It's just an ill of our time. I know there's an American model of children divorcing their parents. So obviously it has all gone awry. It'll come back.
Yeah.
The universe will look after it. It'll come back. It's happening for us, not to us, for sure. But it's really hurtful for the people going through it. And it's a total misread of the data that's coming through and available to us in the beautiful world, in this journey that we're supposed to, destination U. Everybody is on destination U to be the best version of ourselves. And as we get it wrong along the way, our bodies are keeping score, hence the trips to the pharmacy, the over-medication, over-gamifying everything. If it's not fun to do, you can't even... Well, here's an irony near wrapped up in this, but you can't even buy something online without getting this little disc that you have to play a little game before you can put some. Yeah. I mean,
so you have an account on Temu,
Stop! I do not. I can't
Yes,
even
you do.
Oh, I'm a digital dinosaur. Don't even start me on that one. The lads will laugh. You'll hear them laughing in the production room there. But I just think it's really important to hold space for the fact that in the world in which we live, if we lose sight of each other, empathy, those human skills. We've really lost everything. Yeah. You can have everything and nothing
at the same time
if you don't have empathy. And in that space, then people who are being othered or isolated, if that was in ancestral times, and we operate out of the same ancestral pathways, you would feel that you were set aside to be eaten by a hyena if you're set out of your social group or your family group or your relationship and don't understand it. And an older person to be left that not feel like they matter. Maybe they do matter, but if they feel like they don't matter, they're anti-mattering to people because people are busy. So to some extent, it's understandable, but we can do better.
Oh, for sure. I think we've an obligation as a society to do better in elder care.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's a two-way street. I have
It's actually very rewarding, though.
It's so rewarding. I can tell you from personal experience, I have beautiful older people in my life. And I know I've said it on the podcast before. They mean the world to me. They are like my mentors. I just feel so gifted to have particularly a group of older ladies in my life who are just inspirational, literally. As they live, so I learn. Sitting in their company, speedy processors. I mean, one of the ladies I'm talking about is in her mid-80s. Another lady would be early 80s. These people are fabulous. Another lady, very late 70s. Like very late 70s. She'll thank me for that. Like very, very, very late 70s. I think within a day or two. And I have never had more interesting conversation in my life than I have with these lovely, because they have life experience. Yeah. And they have wisdom.
So my pharmacy in Sandiford is adjacent to a primary school, and it's interesting in the morning. So because of the car park, like you'll see folks come along in the morning, they'll park the cars, and you'll see them walk the little children into the school. And in lots of cases now, in the morning, it's lovely to see. We see lots of grandparents walking in their grandchildren. And sometimes if they're patients of ours or whatever, they'll pop in afterwards for something. And it's lovely having the chat with them then, because a lot of them, like literally, and so, some of these grandmothers and grandfathers, they've gotten, it has, you know what it has done for them? It's made them purposeful, and it's given them, it's enriching for them, and it's really enjoyable for them. But you know what? It's a two-way street. They've helped out mum and dad who are probably legging it on the way to work. They've been able to drop Johnny or Mary with their parents, who've then brought them to school. And so it's lovely to see things like that. I think if, and it doesn't always have to be it doesn't have to be a beneficial task like that scenario I've outlined, but it's a nice scenario where you get that intergenerational connection, And
it's a non-transactional doing space. Like, it definitely you're doing, but it's not about that. And I think, and I honour those relationships where parents, as they get older, can stay abreast of the changing world and stay close to their children, their own children, who are, pushing through the decades and then rearing their children to maybe 4 generations in rearing their children. I honour those family groups, those ecosystems that can stay together, learn together, grow together, be compassionate with each other, because it won't always be easy. And it's not, we don't live in an ideal world. It's not the case everywhere. In fact, I'd say it's probably quite rare. But where it works, even if only far in the distance you see a family doing it, I think it gives you permission to aim for that yourself. Yeah. And surely that's, I think Confucius got out there ahead of me on that one. That's what it's all about. Start with your close relationship and your family and your community, and it spreads to the world. That's about all we can do for peace, but we can do that.
Yeah, hear, hear.
Yeah. We would probably have to close it at that, Tom. I could talk to you all day long. Please come back. Would you come back and join us again?
I would, indeed. Absolutely. I really enjoyed meeting you here today, and I really enjoyed the chat very much. Thank you, Síle.
Oh, thank you so much. Gur míle maigat.
Slán go fóill.
And there you have it. Notwithstanding the extraordinary advancements in allopathic medicine, which continue to save and extend lives in remarkable ways, it is worth asking whether or not there's also space for a do health model alongside a treat illness model. In a world that can sometimes lean towards overdiagnosing, overprescribing, over-medicalising and over-drugifying, is there room to consider whether at times doing less might actually help us to achieve more? Where meditation can sit comfortably alongside medication, where stacking small, consistent, life-giving habits becomes a powerful form of preventative care. It begs the question too, whether or not blue zones are in fact a place or a perspective, a noun or a verb. These so-called longevity hotspots were first identified when researchers happened upon communities such as in Okinawa and Sardinia, where people were quietly living longer, healthier lives. Their longevity has been linked to cultural habits like having a Maui. That's just a strong, lifelong social circle. We have those. We can if we don't. Having a clear sense of ikigai. That's just your daily purpose. We can find that. There's huge health value in being able to find strength and beauty through life's challenges, building resilience as you go, practicing the art of a kintsugi kind of love, as I've written about in my poem entitled Show Me the Way to Amaryllis. These places remind us that longevity is less about luck and more about small, consistent rhythms of connection, purpose, and restoration. And so, dear listeners, your task for this week is to decide that from this moment forward, your world can become your very own blue zone, and you are the governor of the longevity solutions that shape it. Begin by reclaiming your balance in the smallest moments. I mean literally, physically reclaim your balance. Every time you move from lying to standing, from couch to standing, from chair to standing, from toilet to standing, do it with awareness. Safely and age appropriately, of course. Where possible, reduce your reliance on armrests or banisters. And as your feet meet the ground, just pause, steady yourself, and then rise with intention. So you're using your home as your training ground as such. Carry your towels or your laundry up and down the stairs with purpose. Put away your clothes with intention. Let your stairs become your daily workout space. Carry your shopping from your car consciously. When you recognise that this is strength building, your mindset strengthens alongside your body. Bend, lift, reach and carry from the powerful vantage point of your own body, wherever you are today and every day, within the safety of where you're at in your wellness, of course. Stretch yourself, don't stress yourself. Build capacity in small steps. Allow yourself to notice over time how far you've come, and when you continue to level up, notice the difference. It's a really good idea to seek daylight generously. Choose sunlight before screen light in the morning. Step outdoors whenever you can and allow natural light to steady your rhythm. It's all very cost-free and actionable. Audit the company that you keep. That's a good one. What conversation is your nervous system sinking to? And just like a gardener, weed out the things that don't grow you and nurture quality company. Who are your people? Ask yourself that question. Are you speaking honestly with them? Are you asking real questions? Are you asking questions at all? Are they asking you questions? Are you allowing yourself to be seen and supported? Strong circles really do help to quiet internal noise, and they help us to face what we sometimes carry silently. Reflect gently on your ikigai. What do you enjoy doing? Notice where purpose already lives in your life and nurture it further. And if the work that you do to earn your currency doesn't meet all of your emotional needs, balance that by consciously creating spaces that bring you joy, meaning, and a real sense of connection. Protect your Maui, your circle of steady support. And in a world that often discards what is imperfect, just practice a kintsugi kind of care. Repair what can be repaired. Mend the relationships that are worth mending. Think about that one. And value the worn, the tested, and the human. Fondness and friendship correct for imperfection. Fondness and friendship help you to rationalise and maturely, equally importantly, know when to leave the table if only disrespect is being served. Embracing our perfectly imperfect selves is an art form in itself. We are all beautifully unfinished. And so it is.